Welcome to the Executive Order Audio Library, where we read Trump's executive orders in full. Trump imagines a world where the U.S. Department of Education no longer exists, and states, parents, and local communities take full control of the schools. This order is about eliminating the Department of Education while giving families and communities more say in how education works. Some feel this is a welcome move forward in educational freedom. Others worry about funding gaps and equity issues. You'll hear exactly what this order says about dismantling the Department of Education and reshaping education policy. To stay on top of future executive orders, please click subscribe and allow notifications so you can be alerted when future recordings are available. This is a reading of Executive Order 14242, Improving Education Outcomes by Empowering Parents, States, and Communities. By the authority vested in me as President, by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, and to enable parents, teachers, and communities to best ensure student success, it is hereby ordered. Section 1. Purpose and Policy. Our nation's bright future relies on empowered families, engaged communities, and excellent educational opportunities for every child. Unfortunately, the experiment of controlling American education through federal programs and dollars, and the unaccountable bureaucracy those programs and dollars support, has plainly failed our children, our teachers, and our families. Taxpayers spent around $200 billion at the federal level on schools during the COVID-19 pandemic, on top of the more than $60 billion they spend annually on federal school funding. This money is largely distributed by one of the newest cabinet agencies, the Department of Education, which has existed for less than one-fifth our nation's history. Congress created the Department of Education in 1979 at the urging of President Jimmy Carter, who received a first-ever presidential endorsement from the country's largest teachers' union shortly after pledging to the union his support for a separate Department of Education. Since then, the Department of Education has entrenched the education bureaucracy and sought to convince America that federal control over education is beneficial. While the Department of Education does not educate anyone, it maintains a public relations office that includes over 80 staffers at a cost of more than $10 million per year. Closing the Department of Education would provide children and their families the opportunity to escape a system that is failing them. Today, American reading and math scores are near historical lows. This year's National Assessment of Educational Progress showed that 70% of eighth graders were below proficient in reading and 72% were below proficient in math. The federal education bureaucracy is not working. Closure of the Department of Education would drastically improve program implementation in higher education. The Department of Education currently manages a student loan debt portfolio of more than $1.6 trillion. This means the federal student aid program is roughly the size of one of the nation's largest banks, Wells Fargo. But although Wells Fargo has more than 200,000 employees, the Department of Education has fewer than 1,500 in its Office of Federal Student Aid. The Department of Education is not a bank, and it must return bank functions to an entity equipped to serve America's students. Ultimately, the Department of Education's main functions can and should be returned to the states. Section 2. Closing the Department of Education and returning authority to the states. A. The Secretary of Education shall, to the maximum extent appropriate and permitted by law, take all necessary steps to facilitate the closure of the Department of Education and return authority over education to the states and local communities while ensuring the effective and uninterrupted delivery of services, programs, and benefits on which Americans rely. B. Consistent with the Department of Education's authorities, the Secretary of Education shall ensure that the allocation of any federal Department of Education funds is subject to rigorous compliance with federal law and administration policy, including the requirement that any program or activity receiving federal assistance terminate illegal discrimination obscured under the label diversity, equity, and inclusion, or similar terms and programs promoting gender ideology. Signed, Donald J. Trump, the White House, March 20, 2025. This concludes the reading of Executive Order 14242, Improving Education Outcomes by Empowering Parents, States, and Communities. To be alerted of future recordings, please click subscribe and click notifications so you'll know when new recordings are available.